So again, good afternoon to all of you. This is the second lesson in music for the second quarter, and what we're going to talk about today is about classical era composers. Sabi nga, ito yung isa sa mga interesting topic about classical period kasi these three composers are the greatest composers in the entire Western music history. Why? Because they revolutionized or they established what we know as classical music today. So sila yung mga tao na nag-set ng standards on how a symphony is to be composed, how a sonata is to be composed, what is the standard for the opera. So sila yun. And at the same time, their works are so epic that they become the parang icon or the parang sila yung naging standard ng ano ba yung dapat music ng classical period, ng classical era in the entire Western music. So ganun sila kagaling. Tsaka sa sobrang galing nitong tatlo na to, para sila mga poster boy na mga classical music websites at saka ng mga concerts. Sila talaga yung pagmumukha niyang tatlo na yan, lagi sila yung lumalabas. And they are Mozart, Haydn, and Beethoven. So for our most essential learning competency, at the end of the lesson, we'll be able to explain the important performance practice, such as setting, composition, role of composers and performers and the audience during the classical period. And the lesson outline will be divided into two parts, which are, first, we'll talk about the discussion or about the introduction to classical music. And I guess I've already given that last week. And then the second part is about who are these classical era composers and their lives, and as well as their works. So for the introduction, know that the classical music is very tuneful, easy to remember, it is simple, it is balanced, and more organized compared to the other periods in Western classical periods, in Western classical era. So itong classical period, siya yung parang pinaka-concise, pinaka-madaling makanta, pinaka-simple sa lahat. Kasi nga, it is a challenge and parang it is anti-baroque style. Kaya naging ganun. Kasi previously, yung style kasi ng baroque, it is very complex, complicated, and it is overly ornamented. So yung mga tao, since the audience of the classical period are mostly ordinary people, kaya they prefer yung mas simpleng klase ng style ng music. Pero at the same time, it's still classy. Yun. Okay, so sabi dyan, composers strive to write music that were straight to the heart instead of challenging listeners with too much complexity. Yan. So classical period also happened to produce three of music history's most famous composers. And they are Franz Joseph Haydn, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, and Ludwig Van Beethoven. Itong tatlong composer na to talagang sobrang epic ng mga yan. Lalo na itong dalawa sa huli, si Mozart at saka si Beethoven. Kahit na ordinaryong tao, kilala sila. Tsaka parang pag sinabi mong classical, silang dalawa talaga yung una mong maiisip, si Mozart at si Beethoven, kasi sobrang sikat nila. And then their music defined the classical style, and they were so celebrated by 19th century music historians that they become poster boys for concert music in general. Yan, kapag magbukas ng Classic FM, kung nakikita nyo yung website na yun, Classic FM, buka nila yung makikita mo doon kasi sobrang sineselebrate ng mga historians at saka ng mga classical musicians as well, composers, yung buhay nitong mga to, nilang si Haydn, si Mozart at saka ni Beethoven. So as a reaction to the excessively fancy music of the Baroque era, classical musicians like Mozart and Haydn preferred balanced structure, clear organization, and simple melodies. Even yung most complicated music ng classical period, you can still hear yung balanced organization, yung clear organization, yung balanced structure niya. At saka, the melody is very remarkable. Madali siyang maalala. So they established the rules for music that provided the framework for composition. Yung mga composers at the present age and even yung mga sumunod na composers kanila from the Romantic period, they follow itong mga rules na establish itong tatlong greatest composer na to pagdating sa pagko-compose ng mga particular genres in classical music. Yeah, so in this lesson, we will study the life and contributions of the three greatest composers of Western classical music. Bakit masasagot dito kung bakit sila tinawag na greatest composers of all time? Yan. So, unahin muna natin yung buhay ni Franz Joseph Haydn. Kasi sa kanilang tatlo, he is the eldest and sabihin na natin na siya siguro yung parang nagsimula ng classical style. Kasi, ayan, so Franz Joseph Haydn was born in March 31, 1732 in Ruro, Austria, and then he died in May 31, 1809. So siya ay eldest of the three and a friend and mentor of Mozart and Beethoven. Si Haydn ay naging kaibigan ni Mozart, nag-meet sila, and meron siyang mga ilang compositions na dinedicate niya for Mozart. Sinasabi niya na grabe tong bata na to, na sobrang galing nito. So na-meet niya si Mozart while Mozart is still a child, while si Beethoven naman ay naging estudyante ni Haydn nung mga age 15 years old siya. So siya yung nagturo kay Beethoven sa pag-compose at saka sa pagtugtog ng piano. So meron siyang malaking influence dun sa dalawang composer na yon. Then Haydn grew up near Vienna in Austrian countryside, and at the age of 7, he embarked on a musical education working as a choir boy at St. Peter's Cathedral in Vienna. So that time, yung Vienna is the musical epicenter during the classical period. Kumbaga, yung mga tao, if they want to be entertained, kumbaga parang gusto nila mag-attend ng mga concerts, mga performances, they just have to travel to Vienna kasi nandun lahat. Mga magagaling na mga musicians, magagaling na mga composers, mga magagandang mga opera house, nandun lahat yon sa Vienna. So para siya tinagurian na musical epicenter of the world nung panahon na yun. And doon nagtrabaho si Franz Joseph Haydn. Yan, as a choir boy sa St. Peter's Cathedral. Yan. Pero, nung panahon ng 1761, na-promote siya as music director sa court of Hungarian aristocracy, Prince Paul Esterházy. So, sino tong si Prince Paul Esterházy? Isa siyang napakamakapangyarihan na aristocrat during time. Kasi prince na siya, at the same time, napaka-influential nitong tao na to, na ang daming bumibisita sa kanya, tsaka marami siyang koneksyon, parang ganun. So, sobrang yaman niya, sobrang makapangyarihan siya. And during the time, if you are working as a court musician or as a performer, as a composer for that kind of aristocrat, kumbaga sobrang laking career break nun for them. So si Haydn, originally hindi naman talaga siya music director sa court nitong si Prince Esterházy. So para siyang parang isa lang siya sa mga musicians, mga tumutugtog, nagpe-perform sa kanya. It's a group na mga musician. And then there is this music director na nagkaroon ng sakit hanggang sa lumala yung sakit. And then, na-discover nitong pamilya na to, nitong mayamang aristocrat na to, na pwede pa lang siyang, parang nagsasub si Haydn sa kanya, dun sa talagang original na music director niya. Nagsasub si Haydn dun. So, nung habang tumatagal, hindi na talaga nakakabalik yun, napansin nila na mas magaling si Haydn kaysa doon sa dati nilang music director. So that is the reason why siya na yung kinuha talaga na naging official na music director ng court nitong mga Esterházy family. So, ang role ng isang court musician is, una, syempre, kinakailangan na isang court director or music director is, una, siya yung magko-compose ng mga music na ipa-perform ng mga musicians nung pamilya na yon, kasi nag-hire sila ng maraming mga musicians. And at the same time, siya yung nagpe-perform, kumbaga nag-aayos ng mga concerts na gustong i-perform nung pamilya na yon for their audience, para o sa kanilang mga bisita. Yan. So para siya, sabi nga dyan, his job was to be the Esterházy's family's iPad. Yan. Ang idea lang doon is dapat every day meron siyang bago na compose na perform yun nung orchestra na hinire ng family to perform inside their house. Yeah, so ganun sila. Ang kagandahan dito sa career ni Haydn is itong pamilya nila, sobrang supportive niya in terms of music, to the point na kung ano yung sabihin ni Haydn, pinaprovide nila. Kaya nga na sobrang yung nasuportahan yung mga ideas niya, yung gusto niya na mangyari na maparami yung orchestra, naging possible yun kasi may kay na magbayad ng maraming musicians yung pamilya to, yung patron niya. At the same time, yung mga, dahil may kaya nga tong pamilya na to, ang nakahire ni Haydn, nakukuha niya mga performers dun sa orchestra niya is yung mga best of the best. So, kaya sobra din gumanda yung career niya. Kumbaga nabigyan ng hustisya yung trabaho ni Haydn because yung raw material niya, yung ginagamit niya mga tao is well supported by the patron na Esterhazy's family. So ganun kaganda yung position ni Haydn nung panahon na yun. And then he was known as a warm, kind director. His orchestra loved him and nicknamed him Papa Haydn. Then and isa sa niya is sobrang love siya ng orchestra niya. Kaya talagang sinusupport siya sa mga rehearsals, ganyan. Kaya tatawag nila sa kanya Papa. And then at the same time, meron kasi, si Haydn kasi parang sobrang lovable ng personality niya. Nandun yung parang sobrang humorous niya. Yan, nasarap siyang pakisamahan. Kaya parang magaling siyang mag-joke. At yung mga jokes niya na yon, nagre-reflect sa mga compositions niya. Example na nga doon is yung Surprise Symphony niya. Diba? Doon sa Surprise Symphony na pinakinggan natin last time. Pero ang tahimik ng music and then all of a sudden, bilang bam, gugulat ka na lang. Ay, sobrang lakas. Kasi mahilig nga siya man-trip. Parang titrip siya sa pamamagitan ng music niya. And then there is this composition pinangalanan na Farewell Symphony. Sa Farewell Symphony naman, ang ginagawa naman doon is isa-isa nawawala yung musician. Isa-isa silang tumatayo, nagwo-walk out. Tapos hanggang sa isa na lang yung natitira, tumutugtog doon sa performance niya ng Symphony number 45. Kasi daw ang program doon is gusto na daw sabihin ni Haydn, parang iparamdam dun sa patron niya na gusto na naming umuwi and tagal-tagal na nitong concert na to. Sobrang tagal na nitong event na to, pauwiin mo na kami. Kaya isa-isa nang nawawala. Kumbaga parang sinadya niya na isa-isang umaalis yung mga musicians niya para makaramdam yung patron niya na gusto na nila umuwi. Ganon. So, yung sa mga composition niya, lahat yun nagre-reflect yung kanyang humor at saka yung pagiging nice ng personality niya. Although sabi nila, yung daw life ni Haydn, yung social life niya, yung career niya is sobrang successful, pero yung kanyang marriage life is hindi naging successful. Kumbaga, yung asawa niya kasi parang hindi siya music lover. So, lagi silang nagkakaroon ng conflict, something like that. So, the ending is hindi din sila nagkaroon ng successful na marriage life. Yun, ganun talaga, hindi mo pwedeng makuha lahat. Hindi pwedeng nasa iyo na lahat. Well, anyway, so si Haydn, he wrote about 104 symphonies, including yung Farewell Symphony na binanggit natin, tsaka Surprise Symphony. Parang, if I'm not mistaken, it's about 108 lahat ng mga symphony ni Haydn. And that is the reason why he was known as the father of symphony. Yung mga composers after him, they labeled him as the father of symphony kasi yung symphony was well established during his time. Kumbaga, pag sinabi natin symphony, yun yung what we are hearing right now na mga orchestral work. So, it's a multi-movement work. Sabihin, mayroon siya iba't ibang mga parts. Later, i-discuss ko sa inyo what is the meaning of a movement. And then, si Haydn na nag-establish nun, how do you compose a symphony? And yun, yung pattern na yun, na standard na sinet ni Haydn na yun, nang sinundan ng mga sumunod sa kanya. That is why he was called the father of symphony. And then, at the same time, he is also the one who invented the string quartet. Previously kasi, nung panahon ng Baroque period, meron na rin mga group of musicians, mga small group of musicians, pero they are not called quartet. Kumbaga, they are called, sabihin na natin na parang chamber orchestra. Kasi yung chamber orchestra, mas liit sila. Pero si Haydn na nag-start nung sinatawag natin na quartet. When you say quartet, it is composed of 2 violins, 1 viola, and a cello. So, 4 musicians yun. And one of the famous quartets of Haydn is yung joke quartet. Yan. So, mamaya, we will listen to that. And then, tingnan nyo siguro bakit kaya tinagurian siya na joke. Siguro it's because nagre-reflect din yung personality ni Haydn as a joker, as yung mahilig mang trip na klase ng composer. Kaya siya tinagurian na joke quartet. And then yun. Sabi dyan, in spite of the rules that were imposed in composition during his time, Haydn was the great innovator and inventor of styles in composition. Kaya nga yung quartet, yung symphony na yan, those were invented and established by Haydn. And then, he experimented freely with various orchestral combinations and instrumental techniques, hindi tulad ng ibang mga composers na nag-exist during the time of Haydn. Kasi, siguro, isa sa reason nun is because meron talaga siyang financial support na nakukuha from his patron. And that is the reason why. Parang meron siyang, parang malaya niyang maigawa yung makapag-experiment ng iba't ibang mga musical styles. At the same time, yung orchestra na hawak niya, magagaling sila. So, possible talaga yon. And he died in 1809 at the age of 77 at naging siyang successful even at the end of his life. Yun. So, that is the life of Haydn. And then, here are some of his famous compositions. One is the Queen, or the Symphony number 85 in B-flat major, or Larine. And then, we also have yung string quartet, or also known as the Emperor Quartet, in C major, Opus 76 number 3. And then, we had the Surprise Symphony, or Symphony number 94 in G major. This is the second movement. Yung Surprise Symphony is the second movement nung entire Symphony number 94. Malaki kasi yan, mahaba yan, Symphony number 94 na yan. Pero yung second movement niya, yun yung Surprise. And then last is yung Symphony number 100 in G major, or also known as the Military Symphony. Sige, try natin. Let's listen to one of his compositions. Here is the Joke Quartet by Joseph Haydn. Can you see my presentation?
Di po.
No? Wait.
Not yet, Papa.
Okay, wait lang. Yan, there you go. Okay, sige, let's play. Yan. So, pakinggan nyo na lang ng buo yung entire quartet in E-flat major na joke quartet ni Haydn. Siguro isa sa reason bakit siya tinagurian na joke quartet, it's because yung dynamics niya, yung parang just trademark naman ni Haydn yun, na mahilig siya na nanggugulat ng mga taong bayan habang nagpe-perform. Yun. So, that is the reason why tinagurian siya na joke. Yan. Ay, sorry. Wait lang. Wait. Yan. So, the rest of the compositions, pakinggan nyo na lang siya kapag meron kayong time. Second is Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Meron isang pelikula to na about the life of Mozart. The title of that movie is Amadeus. If you have time, I guess I'm not sure if it is available in Netflix, pero parang marami na naman na movies na naka-release niyan about yun sa Amadeus na yan. Kung meron kayong pagkakataon, or siguro meron tayong libre pagkakataon, panoorin natin siya sa klase natin. Pero sa to sobrang ganda ng pagkakagawa nitong movie na to. Dito makikita ninyo at sa inyo ma-realize bakit siya tinagurian na genius, bakit tinagurian na music genius si Mozart. And it tells about the tragedy of his life, yung story ng kanya ng buhay ni Mozart. So dun sa palabas na yon, sabi diyan, musical boy genius, piano virtuoso and giggling guy from the movie Amadeus, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart is a legend whose fame extends from the concert hall to pop culture. Mozart was one of the top composers of music classical era. And then many composers considered Mozart's elegant yet powerful music to be the pinnacle of classical style. Have you ever heard about the this study about Mozart effect? Have you heard about that? Are you familiar with that? Mozart
Hindi po.
effect. Hindi. Okay, sige. If you are not familiar with it, I suggest na i-research nyo sa YouTube. It is already, sa Google, it is already proven to be true na sinasabi doon sa Mozart effect that when you listen, that na yung daw music ni Mozart, it could boost memory. And there are some studies na yung mga, yes, that is right, na there are some studies na kapag ang baby daw habang nasa sinapupunan pa na nanay, and then you will listen to the music of Mozart, there is a high tendency that that child becomes a genius. Not only in music but also in other areas. Parang mas mataas yung memory niya, o kaya sobrang galing niya sa math, or minsan talagang kumbaga parang mas advanced siya, mas advanced yung logical reasoning niya compared to other kids. Yan. Kasi nga daw, ang scientific explanation dun is because yung music daw ni Mozart, ganun siya ka-perfect na when you continue to listen to it, kumbaga parang nanonormalize yung development ng katawan ng isang tao habang tumatagal. And that is the reason why, kapag syempre, mas normal yung development mo, mas there is a greater chance na mag-increase or mas ma-boost yung iyong IQ. So that is the reason why kapag yung mga habang baby pala nakikinig na sila ng Mozart, parang nagiging matalino talaga sila pagdating ng araw. I'm not sure if that applies to all, pero marami na talagang nag-claim na this is true. Yung effect na yan, yung study na yan, yung if you will listen to the compositions of Mozart. Particularly yung composition niya. Kasi meron ding ibang study na kahit anong classical music naman. Pero sa lahat daw ng mga classical music na ina-applyan nung study na yon, yung mga compositions daw ni Mozart, yung pinaka parang effective sa lahat. The reason why is because his compositions are almost perfect. Kasi nga, basta malalaman niyo, try to listen to his works na halos lahat, even yung tono, yung beat niya, lahat ng yun, almost perfect talaga lahat. Yan. So sabi dito, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart is an Australian who was born on January 27, 1756, and he died in December 5, 1791 in Salzburg, Austria, and he was considered as one of the most amazing child prodigies in history. Sinabi natin child prodigy, sabihin simula pa lang pagkabata, but genius na siya. Sila na nga daw yata ang kinoconsider na talaga na pinakamagaling na child prodigy na buhay sa daigdig na to. Kaya nga daw, yung pangalawang pangalan niya na Amadeus, bagay na bagay daw talaga sa kanya. Ibig sabihin kasi ng Amadeus is beloved by God. So, this is because most of his works are considered as parang hindi siya gawa ng tao. Kumbaga parang merong divine intervention kung bakit nagiging ganun ka-perfect yung mga trabaho niya. Meron pa nga mga chismis doon sa panahon na yon na kaya daw makapag-compose ni Mozart in 10 minutes bago mag-start yung mismong concert. Ganon siya katindi. Imagine nyo, yung isang buong overture, tatapusin niya in 10 minutes. Susulat niya lang. Minsan daw tapos na daw yung sa utak niya, hindi na lang niya sinusulat. Ganon siya kagaling. na kaya niya makapag-compose ng isang overture, isang composition ng isang upuan in 10 minutes lang na i-perform ng for a concert. So, ganun kagaling si Mozart. Ganun siya ka-genius. Then, sabi dito, as a child, he was able to play the harpsichord and violin. Nag-start siyang mag-violin at the age of 4. Nagpe-perform na siya noon. Kung meron kayong kapatid na 4-year-old, sige, tingnan nyo yung kapatid nyo na yun, o meron kayong kakilala na 4-year-old. Imagine niyo yung bata na yun. I-compare nyo yun, imagine niyo na nagpe-perform na siya ng violin sa harapan ng mga aristocrats. So, kung gaano katindi yun, kung gaano kagaling yun. So, si Mozart kaya na yun. At hindi lang siya kaya makapag-perform, nakakapag-improvise pa siya ng mga fugue. Pag sinabi mo improvisation, it means on the spot na performance yun. And then he could write minuet. Minuet are short pieces that are intended for dance. And he could read music perfectly at first sight. Meron ngang story doon sa dito sa buhay niya na nagpunta si Mozart sa isang chapel, and then yung music noon is merong isang famous na choral piece doon sa simbahan na yon na hindi siya pwedeng ilabas in public. Kumbaga ang nakakapag-aral lang doon, nakakakanta lang doon is yung mga choir na nandoon sa loob. And then narinig ni Mozart yung kanta na yon, tapos inonotate niya ulit. Isinulat niya ulit yung music na narinig niya. Tapos nakita ng mga nung pinakita niya ng do sa mga tao, kopyang-kopya as if parang totoo yung pyesa na itinatago, parang kapares-kapares doon. In time na yun, sobrang naking kasalanan nun. Kumbaga parang punishable by death siya. Pero instead na ikulong si Mozart or ipahatulan siya ng kamatayan, ang ginawa nung Pope nung sa simbahan na yon, ginawa pa siyang knight kasi sobrang na-impress yung Pope sa kanya. Imagine that, sa pakinigan mo lang tapos nakopya mo na yung buong pyesa na yon. So ganun siya katindi. And then he also composed a symphony at the age of 8. Imagine nyo, mayroong kakilalang 8-year-old. Nakakapag-compose na siya ng symphony. Symphony that is intended for a whole orchestra composed of 60 to 100 musicians. So, si Haydn nakakapag-compose siya at the age of 30 ng mga symphony. Compare yun sa age ni Mozart nung nagsimula siya mag-compose ng symphony. Age of 8 lang siya. And then, an oratorio, this is even more grand than a symphony kasi an oratorio is may choir na yan eh. May choir na kasama na yung symphony. And then, last is a full opera at the age of 12. Yung mga magagaling na composers natin like Beethoven, Giuseppe Verdi, Wagner, at yung mga iba pa pag-aaralan natin in the Romantic period, they started composing opera nung matatanda na sila. Pero si Mozart, nakakapag-compose siya ng isang opera, buong opera, nung panahon ng 12 years old pa lang siya. Imagine niyo, pinagagagawa mo ng 12 years old ka. Pero siya, ganun na yung ginagawa niya noon. So, ganun siya katindi. So, because of that, his father, Leopold, who was also a musician, a violinist, yun ang teacher niya, was eager to show him off. Kumbaga, tina-travel niya si Mozart in different parts of Europe para i-flex yung talent ng anak niya. So, he toured throughout Europe and performed at the courts of famous aristocrats during the time. And he was even knighted by the Pope. Ito yung kinukwento ko sa inyo kanina. He was even knighted by the Pope at age of 14 after transcribing by ear the choral piece exclusively performed by the famous Sistine Chapel Choir during the Holy Week in Rome. So, ganun kagaling si Mozart. Then, when he was 15, Mozart returned to his hometown that was currently ruled by a tyrant prince Archbishop Hieronymus Colloredo. So, sino tong si Hieronymus Colloredo na to? Siya yung current na leader or parang namumuno sa Salzburg, Austria during that time. At itong tyrant na to, hindi niya talaga kinonsider si Mozart as great. Kumbaga, although hinire niya si Mozart as part of his court musicians, just like yung kung paano hinire ng Esterhazy family si Haydn, siya considered na isa lang siyang sa mga subjects nitong archbishop na to. And syempre, kung ikaw ay isang child prodigy, sikat na sikat ka simula pa pagkabata, tapos i-consider ka na parang ka-level ka lang ng mga ordinary musicians, what will you feel? Kaya parang ma-hurt yung ego mo doon. Kaya constantly, nagkakaroon sila ng conflict nitong patron niya na to, nitong archbishop na to. Kaya nga, yung mga sumunod na yon, in the next decade ng buhay ni Mozart, parang yun na yung start ng struggle niya. Kasi hindi ka naman habang buhay na child prodigy. Dahil syempre, although you are talented, pero hindi ka habang buhay na child. kaya parang habang tumatanda siya, nagbabago yung story nagbabago yung kwento ng buhay niya. Kaya nga yan, over the next decade, tinatry ng papa niya na humanap ng ibang patron para kay Mozart, pero hindi siya naging successful. And then, unti-unti na bumaba yung kanyang popularity because of that. And then, at the same time, nung last part na nun, dahil lagi sila nag-aaway nung patron niya, sa huli, nag-resign na si Mozart sa kanya. Talagang naging freelance musician na lang siya. Kasi pwede ka naman talaga mabuhay as freelance musician in Vienna kasi Vienna is the music capital of the world. Kumbaga, kung talagang pagaling ka, hindi pwede mo ibenta yung sarili mo. Kumbaga, business mo yung sarili mo. Hindi ka na kinakailangan magpa-under pa ng isang patron. Although mas maganda na meron kang patron kasi syempre parang supportado yung mga concerts mo ng mga patron na yun. So si Mozart, dahil di kaya ng pride niya yun, ginawa niya, nag-freelance na lang siya. So the early years of his career in Vienna were indeed successful. So he was hired to perform in the courts of emperor and nobility, and he taught pupils who paid him high fees. His works were published, and his German opera, Adaptation of Seraglio, hindi ko kasi siya kaya pronounce sa German. And then last is yung The Marriage of Figaro. Yan dalawa na yan na composition niya, yan ay sobrang sumikat nung panahon na yan. Nung simula nung nag-freelance musician na siya. Kaso, yan, sabi dyan, he was even praised by Haydn, acknowledging him as the greatest composer that he knew. Imagine, si Haydn na yun, statement na ni Haydn yun, na i-declare, pinoclaim niya sa lahat, mga nakakakilala sa kanya. Itong tao na to is the greatest composer na kilala ko sa talambuhay ko. So, gaano kaganda yung proclamation na yun. Pero, sabi nga, kahit na yung naging successful yung performance ng The Marriage of Figaro, at even the emperor even acknowledged the work. Pero meron comment yung emperor dun sa work na yun na Marriage of Figaro. If you will watch Amadeus, nandun yung detail nun. Sinabi nung emperor na para kasing masyadong malaswa yung story ng Marriage of Figaro. Kasi parang patungkol sa mga kabit-kabit yun parang ganun. Na medyo malaswa yung story niya. Kaya sabi nung emperor, this is not appropriate for my constituents or for my subjects. Kaya dahil sa negative comment na yun, parang nagtaasan yung kilay ng mga aristocrats kay Mozart. Parang unti-unti hindi sinuportahan yung mga sumunod na gawa niya. Yan, sabi dyan, Vienna considered Mozart's music as complicated and with too much dissonance and hard to follow because he is really good. Kumbaga, dahil sa sobrang genius niya, parang nahirapan sumabay yung mga ordinaryong tao at even yung mga aristocrats sa style ng music niya. Sabi nga dun sa movie, too many notes. Sobrang dami daw ng mga notes na maririnig ka sa composition niya. Kaya parang hindi nila kayang sabayan yung ganong style na pinapakita ni Mozart. Then his pupils declined and the elites no longer supported his concerts. Then he was put into a lot of debt and gradually his health also declined. So unti-unti siyang nalaos, in short. So yung last year ng buhay ni Mozart is sobrang tragic na nagkaroon na siya ng mga sakit, iba't ibang klase ng sakit, nakaranas siya ng depression, hinahunting siya ng mga nung pinagkakautangan niya, and then nag-fail yung marriage niya, tapos namatay pa yung papa niya na nasumuporta sa kanya. Kaya talagang sobrang laki ng tragedy na nangyari sa kanya. Tapos at the same time, yung career niya sobrang bagsak. Pero, nung mga bandang huli, since sobrang desperate na nga si Mozart para i-revive, parang buhayin ulit yung career niya, nagkaroon siya ng 2 commission, which is yun yung dalawang opera niya na pinahiratanam, The Magic Flute at saka Clemency of Titus. Pag pinagsulat ka ng isang orchestra, ng isang opera, sobrang hirap nun. Kasi you have to write the story, yung linya, yung dialogue, and at the same time, you have to write the music for each characters and for the orchestra. So, ganun ka big time ang isang opera. As well as yung storyline nun, ikaw lahat ang gagawa nun. And noong time na pinagawa siya, yung kinommission sa kanya itong 2 opera na to, sabay. So, sa sobrang desperado ni Mozart na gusto niya maibalik yung dati niyang glory, pinilit niyang pagsabayin na i-compose itong 2 na to. Hanggang to the point na sobrang naapektuhan yung kalusugan niya, na bumagsak yung katawan niya. Kaya while hard at work, he even received an anonymous commission to compose a requiem, which is a mass for the dead. Isa to sa mga conspiracy theories sa Western classical history. Yung daw requiem ni Mozart, this was this came from an anonymous commission. Ibig sabihin, yung tao na nagpapagawa nun sa kanya, nagpapakompose nun sa kanya, is hindi siya kumbaga, hindi niya ni-reveal yung sarili niya. If you watch the movie, nakamaskara siya, nakadamit siya ng black and then nakamaskara siya. So, hindi nakilala ng Mozart, hindi alam ni Mozart kung sino tong tao na to na napupunta sa kanya, nag-hunt sa kanya na sinasabi na, compose mo ko ng isang requiem. So, a requiem is a mass for the dead. If you have time, mas maganda pakinggan nyo yun, yung requiem ni Mozart na yun. So, sabi dun, dinedicate daw ni Mozart yung requiem na yun. Although that is a commission piece. Dinedicate ni Mozart yung requiem yun for himself. Kasi pakiramdam niya, kumbaga yung career niya at yung kalusugan niya is already dead. Yan. So, his requiem was unfinished, hindi natapos. And 2 months before his death, the Magic Flute was premiered with a resounding praise in Vienna. Ito yung pinaka-tragic sa lahat kasi diba, si Mozart nung last part ng buhay niya, he's really struggling financially and with his health. And then, nung na-premiere yung Magic Flute, yung Magic Flute, sobra siyang pinalakpakan ng mga tao. Kumbaga na-revive yung glory ni Mozart. But sadly, it came too late. Sabi nga, kung dumating lang daw ng mas maaga, kung na-premiere lang daw ng mas maaga yung The Magic Flute, bago siya namatay, sana hindi ganun naging ending ng buhay ni Mozart. Kumbaga hindi naging ganun ka-tragic. Kasi yung kinita daw nung Magic Flute is enough para mabayaran lahat ng mga pagkakautang niya at saka maibalik yung dati niyang status. Pero dahil nga sa sobrang dami ng pinagdaanan niya, namatay na si Mozart bago na i-premiere yung The Magic Flute. So, nakakalungkot pa dyan, yung reason kung bakit siya namatay is sobrang controversial. May nagsasabi na namatay daw siya due to rheumatic fever. Meron din nagsasabi na na-poison daw siya. Si Mozart, he believed that he is being poisoned. And then, merong nagsasabi na ang nag-poison daw sa kanya is yung kanyang katunggali na si Salieri. Pero sinasabi ni Salieri na magkaibigan kami ni Mozart, hindi ko siya lalasunin. May nagsasabi na si Salieri daw yung anonymous na commissioner na yon. And marami pang iba't iba pang mga theories patungkol sa kamatayan niya. Pero ang nakakalungkot doon, nung namatay siya noong December 5, he did not receive any glory. In fact, he was even buried in a pauper's grave. Pag sinabi mong pauper's grave, it is a common grave for all. Para lang siya isang hukay na lahat ng mga patay doon tinatapon. Hindi siya nabigyan ng proper na libing. At wala man lang nakapagbigay ng honor sa kanya nung panahon na inilibing siya. So, kumbaga, nag-start siya ng sobrang great and then nag-end siya ng ganun ka-tragic yung kanyang buhay. Pero, kahit na ganun ang nangyari sa kwento ng buhay ni Mozart, kino-consider siya ng mga sumunod sa kanya na sobrang dakila ng lahat ng mga naging contributions niya. At walang nakatapat dun sa standard na isinet ni Mozart when it comes to perfection in musical compositions. Sa sobrang great ng buhay ni Mozart, kahit nasa 30 lang yung years na nabuhay siya, nakapag-compose siya ng over 600 compositions. Imagine, yung composition niya sa sobrang dami, ninanumberan na lang nila, K626, K492. Ito, yung Requiem Mass in D minor, ito yung last na piyesa na kinompose niya. Ito yung sinasabi ko sa inyo, na unfinished Requiem ni Mozart. And then we have the Overture from the Marriage of Figaro. We also have the Queen of the Night. This is also a very popular composition. And of course, yan, yung Rondo alla Turca or the Turkish March. This was composed for the piano by Mozart. If you have time, just listen to these works or i-search na marami pa siyang ibang mga compositions na sobrang great. Pero ito, I really suggest you try to listen to the Requiem Mass of Mozart. The first part is really haunting compared to the other compositions ni Mozart yan, yung Queen of the Night na yan. Lahat ng composition niya parang sobrang saya, parang sobrang positive. And then all of a sudden, maririnig mo yung Requiem Mass na nagsispeak of ng death. Ganon. Yan. And then sabi nga dito, ayan, it has attracted a huge amount of myth and conjecture kasi ang daming conspiracy theory about the Requiem Mass. Kaya yan ang kinuwento ko sa inyo. At actually, natapos tong Requiem Mass. Hindi lang siya natapos ni Mozart, pero merong tao na nagtuloy nitong unfinished Requiem na ito, which is yun yung kaibigan niya, si Susmer, na yun din yung nag-perform kay Mozart nitong nitong unfinished requiem. And then sabi niya, nung narinig ni Mozart yung unfinished requiem na yun, na pinerform ng kaibigan niya si Susmir, parang umiyak siya ng umiyak, tapos after a few hours, namatay na siya. Ganun. Yun yung story niyan. And then last is Beethoven. Yan. So far, ano pa ba? Nandyan pa ba kayo? Haba ng kwentuhan natin, no? Yeah, ayan. Okay, so last is yung si Ludwig Van Beethoven. If we will still have time, we'll try to listen to some of their compositions. And then, okay, so si Haydn ay nabuhay ng sobrang saya and successful. And then si Mozart, nag-start siya ng masaya, nag-end siya ng malungkot. Si Beethoven naman, kabaligtaran ni Mozart. Nag-start si Beethoven ng malungkot and then nag-end siya ng masaya. Yan. So, I guess nabigyan ko na kayo ng konting pahapyaw about the life of Ludwig van Beethoven. So, he was born in Bonn, Germany. If you will visit Germany, alam ko si Paul, yung kaibigan, yung kapatid ni Cosme, nag-aral doon, and then nakakapagkwentuhan kami. It's really legit na meron talagang street sa Bonn, Germany na kung saan ino-honor yung buhay ni Beethoven. Yung music lang niya yung pinapatugtog sa lugar na yon. And even yung house niya and yung piano niya is still there. It was preserved. Kasi ganun, binigyan ng malaking honor ng mga Germans si Beethoven because of his contribution in the field of music and arts. So, sino ba si Ludwig van Beethoven? So, sabi dyan, he was a passionate composer who mastered the elegant classical style and pushed it to its limit. So, minaster niya yung classical style and then he pushed it to its limit. That is the reason why he created something out of the classical style. Nag-create siya ng panibagong style na music, which is yun yung pag-uusapan natin mamaya. So, he pushed yung compositional style ng, kumbaga siya, sobrang challenge siya yung classical style to the point na nakapag-create siya ng panibagong period in Western music, which is the Romantic period. So Beethoven grew up in Bonn, Germany. His father's debilitating alcoholism created a challenging childhood for young Beethoven. He had to provide for his mother and brothers from a young age. So, sabi ko nga sa inyo, yung buhay ni Beethoven is sobrang kontra sa buhay ni Mozart. Si Mozart kasi parang sobrang love siya ng lahat nung bata siya. While si Beethoven, he had a very challenging childhood. Kasi palagi siyang pinasaktan ng papa niya, lagi siyang binubugbog, napapahiya. Kasi hindi siya kasing talented ni Mozart. Although tumutugtog siya, nagpa-perform siya, pero hindi siya ganun kagaling. And then, dahil nasa sobrang inggit ng tatay ni Beethoven, dito kay Leopold, yung tatay naman ni Mozart. Kumbaga, ang daming beses na nag-conduct siya ng mga concert for Beethoven, parang ganon. And then, syempre, napapahiya yung tatay niya, napapahiya si Beethoven, lahat yung pamilya nila, kaya pinag-uusapan sila. And dahil doon, lagi siyang nabubugbog ng papa niya. And then, nung mga later part ng buhay ni Beethoven, namatay yung papa niya, and then parang all of a sudden, nagkaroon siya ng magandang break. So, unti-unting lumabas yung talent niya sa pagko-compose, at naging teacher niya si Haydn noong 1792. So, siya yung parang composition teacher ni Beethoven. Kaya, if you listen to some of works of Beethoven, yung mga early works ni Beethoven, really inspired by Haydn's music. Kasi nga, teacher niya yon. And then, ang trabaho talaga ni Beethoven is, syempre, meron din siyang mga patron, aristocratic patrons, just like Haydn and Mozart. Pero, he worked as a pianist and teacher dun sa kanila. So, he gained a reputation around Vienna for powerful, moving piano playing and for incredibly nasty temper. So, si Beethoven, yung mga piano pieces niya sobrang celebrated. Yan, yung isa pinarinig ko sa inyo, di ba? Yung Moonlight Sonata, yung Pathetic Sonata, yung mga yan, mga kilalang mga piano pieces niya, yung Furielis, those are really famous and popular piano pieces even nung panahon pa na nabubuhay pa siya. Then sabi dito, kilala siya sa pagiging mainitin ng ulo. Pero ang reason kasi nun, yung pagiging mainitin niya ng ulo is kasi nga, unti-unti siyang naka-experience ng gradual hearing loss nung panahon ng age 20s niya. So when Beethoven was in his 20s, something happened that would ruin his piano career but jumpstart his composing. He began to lose his hearing. So nung panahon na to na unti-unti na nabibingi si Beethoven, ano siya, kumbaga parang napilitan na siya na mag-resign or mag-retire as a musician. Bakit? Kasi, halimbawa, magpe-perform ka ng piano with the orchestra and then you cannot hear what they are doing. What would happen? Of course, what will happen is disaster. At hindi kayo magkakasabay eh. Nagsisimula ka na, hindi pa pumapasok yung orchestra. O kaya nauuna ka, hindi, ito yung bilis mo, yung orchestra iba yung bilis nila, pilit ka nilang hinahabol. So dahil hindi mo sila narinig, nahihirapan ka na makisabay sa ibang mga musicians. And then at the same time, nahihirapan na din siya na express yung sarili niya through the piano kasi hindi niya narinig yung sarili niya kung malakas ba siya o mahina ba siya. So, yung mga audience parang naiinis na pakinggan siya. By the way, meron ding movie si Ludwig Van Beethoven. If you want to watch his biography, the title of that is My Immortal Beloved. Yun. So, panoorin nyo yun. Doon malalaman nyo kung kanino nakadedicate yung Fur Elise. Yun. And then, sabi dito, he suffered an emotional crisis in 1802, which he described in a letter of the scholars called Heiligenstradt Testament. I don't know how it is pronounced. And then, in it, Beethoven confessed the depression caused by his disability, but also his determination to find hope through sharing music in the world. Sabi nga nila, from struggling to victory, from struggling to triumph, yun daw yung motto ni Beethoven sa kanyang buhay. Doon kinukwento niya sa kanyang kaibigan na maraming beses niya na tinry na mag-suicide. Pero pinipigilan siya ng pag-asa niya na merong, I say that he still believed that something would come out of this that I am experiencing right now. And then yung struggle niya na yun, it is reflected in his music. Although hindi na siya nakakapag-perform as a musician, pero he tried to compose music even without hearing it. And one example nga is yung Moonlight Sonata na pinarinig ko sa inyo last time. So, yung kaya daw sobrang moving ng music ni Beethoven, kaya mafe-feel mo yung emotions nung kanyang composition. It's because that is not composed because of an ear or because of hearing. Those music are composed because of struggling. Kuhanin nyo. Kumbaga, he tried to put his emotion into notes, to musical notes, and yung mga tao lang ang nakakarinig nun. Hindi niya na narinig. Naririnig niya lang yun sa kanyang isip lang, pero hindi na talaga in actuality. Yung mga tao ang nakakarinig nung interpretation ng mga notes na sinusulat niya. So yeah, sabi dyan, his works brought him such acclaim that he became the first composer to earn a living solely through writing music. Diba dito nag-struggle si Mozart, kaya nga siya nagkabaon-baon sa utang eh. Kasi hindi niya kinayang suportahan ng pagko-compose lang niya yung ikabubuhay niya. Pero si Beethoven, siya yung kauna-unahang composer na nagawa niyang mabuhay sa pamamagitan ng composition, purely composition lang. And then, through his symphonies, piano sonatas, and other works, Beethoven injected classical style with a new level of dramatic intensity. Kaya nga sabi dun sa first statement, diba, he pushed classical music to its limit kasi he tried to insert dramatic intensity in most of his works. And then his challenging life became as legendary as his music, and later composers looked to him as a model of a brand new concept, which is the idea that music can express a composer's own personal story. Before that is not a popular idea. Noong panahon nila Mozart, nila Haydn, they're just composing music for the sake of entertainment. Kumbaga, wala siyang hidden meaning, wala siyang ine-express sa'yo. Kumbaga, pinapakinggan mo lang siya to relax, to be entertained, to be amazed dun sa galing ng musicians. Pero, because of the life of Beethoven, because of what happened in his story, nagkaroon ng idea yung mga composers na possible pala yun, na pwede mo i-express yung iyong nararamdaman, yung iniisip mo through the arts, through music. Yan, sabi niya dyan, he revealed more vividly than any of his predecessors the power of music to convey a philosophy of life without the aid of a spoken text. Diba? If you want to express yourself, what will you do? You will tell them kung ano yung nararamdaman mo. Diba? You will express yourself through words. Pero si Beethoven, since wala nga siyang ganong klaseng kakayahan, dahil hindi niya kayang ma-express yung sarili niya yung lahat ng struggle niya through words. He tried to convey those message through his music. And then in certain of his composition is to be found the strongest assertion of human will in all music. Yung baga yung music niya, yung pinaka nagkukwento ng struggles at saka yung hope na that there is something more dun sa kanyang buhay. Yan. Kaya nga, sabi dito, Beethoven's life and music helped inspire a musical trend called Romanticism. Romantic period was started because of Beethoven. Yun, yung story niya, yung kanyang paraan ng pagko-compose that express himself through music is what we call Romanticism right now. So in which narrative, originality, and emotion were all important. So he started Romanticism in music in early 1820s, completely rebelling against the standard of classical music. Lately, nung mga last 7 years of his life, he's no longer composing for the classical period. He's no longer following the style na sinusunod na establish nila Haydn at saka nila Mozart. Completely rebelling na siya dun sa mga standards na yun. Kumbaga, pinupush niya na meron pa yan, mas higit dyan. Meron pa tayong kayang ilabas na mas higit dyan sa style na yan na ginawa natin. Kaya nga, sabi dito, his death in 1827 marked the end of the classical era in music. His contribution to both major eras in Western music, which is classical and romantic era, gave him the title, the giant who bridged the two eras. So, napapansin niyo, bakit kaya 1827 nag-end ang classical period? Bakit hindi siya nag-end ng 1820s? Bakit siya naging 1650s to 1750? Bakit nag-start ang classical period ng 1750s to 1827? Why did it not end 1750 to 1820s? Kasi nga, nung panahon na yon, si Beethoven kasi is a very iconic composer from the classical period. Kaya, nung 1827 na namatay siya, na-end na rin yung classical period. Pero, mapapansin ninyo, ang romantic period, nag-start siya ng 1820. Hindi siya nag-start ng 1827. Unlike ng Baroque period na nung namatay si Bach, wala na talaga. Siya, ang romantic period, sobrang eksakto nung start niya. 1820s. Which is yun yung year na buhay pa si Beethoven. Buhay pa si Beethoven nun. At nagko-compose na siya. It is still parang classical period. Kumbaga nag-mix yung dalawang period, yung classical at saka romantic because of Beethoven. Kaya nga siya tinagurian na giant who bridged the two eras. So, that is the life of Beethoven. Yung last composition niya ni Beethoven na pangalan nito, Symphony Number 9, Ode to Joy. Yon ang parang napakaraming nag-standing ovation nung time na yon. At naano pa niya yon, nakapag-perform pa siya doon. Na-conduct niya pa yon, yung Symphony Number 9. Bago siya, kumbaga parang nagkaroon siya ng opportunity na ma-perform niya yung huling-huling composition niya na Symphony Number 9, na kahit nabingin na siya, tsaka matanda na siya. Tapos, so, kumbaga, nung nilibing na siya, yung buong Germany parang in-honor siya doon. Kaya nga sinabi na kabalik rin yung story ng buhay niya. Kasi kahit na hindi siya kilala nung kabataan niya, nung nag-end siya, sobrang naging sikat si Beethoven. Ganun nag-end yung kanyang buhay, yung kwento ng kanyang buhay. So, ito yung ilan sa mga sikat na compositions ni Beethoven na I encourage you to listen to. We have the Arioca Symphony, or this is also known as the Emperor's Symphony kasi this is dedicated to Napoleon Bonaparte. Dati kasi ina-idolize ni Beethoven si Napoleon Bonaparte. Kaya lang, nung nag-declare si Napoleon Bonaparte na emperor, na hari, nabisit si Beethoven sa kanila. Kaya pinilitan niya ginawa niya na lang na instead na dedicated sa kanya, dinedicate niya na lang, tinitlan niya na lang na Arioca or Emperor. Itong symphony na ito. And then, another is yung Symphony Number 5 in C minor. This is very popular as well. Yan. Yan. Symphony Number 5 in C minor. And then we have the Pathetic Sonata. Yan. And then last is, ito na yon, yung sinasabi ko sa inyo na last composition ni Beethoven is the Choral Symphony or Symphony Number 5, Opus 125. So this is an extremely powerful symphony which revolutionized all of music. The composer innovatively added a choir into the last movement to sing the Schiller's poem Ode to Joy, the Beethoven Magnificent Melody. So that's it. So far, do you have any question? Okay, ano pong era si Chopin? Si Chopin is from the Romantic period. Yan. So, yan, sila Chopin, Schubert, sila Wagner, Tchaikovsky, yung mga composer na yan are all inspired by Beethoven. Lahat sila. Sobrang idol nila si Beethoven. Yun, from different parts of the world, na-inspire sila. Yan, so sino pa? Ano pa? Do you have any other question? Or comments, ano masasabi ninyo sa lesson natin. Hindi na tayo nakapagpakinig kasi masyadong marami tayong ito pala, sige, try natin. Pakinggan ninyo ito. Ito yung Requiem Mass ni Mozart. Wait lang ha. Let's listen to the Requiem Mass. First part lang. Yan. Kapag manonood kayo ng live na performance, huwag kayo papalakpak ha sa orchestra. Pero sila sobrang galing. Pinalakpakan na nila. Well, anyway, yun. Isa yun sa mga maganda composition ni Mozart. Ito pa isa. Teka. Where is that instead? Ay, hindi na share. Sorry. Cool, pakinggan nyo na lang when you have time yung magic flute. Sige, try natin. The magic flute. Let's try. Ito, Queen of the Night. Tingnan konti. Here. Yun. So, yan naman yung the magic flute. Yan. Right. Sige, baka meron pa kayong questions?